welfare programs in Israel itself. I thought it was a fitting theme for the Torah blessing, which we will say right now. We'll say the Hebrew and then we'll say the English together. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech ha'olam, asher kedeshanu b'mitzvotav v'tzivanu la'asok b'divrei Torah. Blessed are you, Adonai our God, ruler of the universe, who hallows us with mitzvot, commanding us to engage with words of Torah, and let us say Amen. All right, so Parshat Mishpatim. So real quickly, does anyone happen to know what the word mishpat or mishpatim means off the top of your head? You can unmute or raise your hand, whatever's good. And this is not a test. This is more just if you happen to know, because I'm very much going to talk about it extensively very soon. All right, so in that case, I'll hold it in suspense. But there's a reason why you may recognize this picture, which is the Israeli Knesset. It's where the Israeli parliament meets. Specifically, it's the inside of the Knesset where, I mean, as is the case with parliaments around the world, the Israeli parliament is no different. It can be on the Raqqa side, in addition to being on the Samar side and the Syria side. I was there on a fellowship. We had the pleasure of being inside. It was pretty remarkable to be where many meaningful events happened. So Mishpatim means judgments, as in singular judgment, mishpat, or mishpatim, judgments. And y'all may remember from the first time we were together, I'm a big fan of Peanuts and Snoopy. I have two cartoons here that sort of set the tone. I will read them out loud in case you can't read the font. Starting on the left, we have Lucy, but instead of her psychiatric help, Penina, was that a hand? Let's see if that does it. Try it now, Penina.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay, mishpat also means a sentence.
No, yes. So hold that thought.
Mishpatim means sentences.
Hold that thought.
I think it's very important to know, because sometimes you get a judgment before you even weigh down the object of the
Very well said. I have
it's very important to realize that mishpat is also a sentence. So this is something that we need to be very aware of. That people sentence somebody without going through the trial. Okay.
Yeah. No, I think 4 slides, we're going to talk about the various meanings of mishpatim. And exactly what Penina said, sentence is exactly one of them. So in terms of the cartoon, real briefly, we have Joe Cool, Lucy doing court of law, legal aid, 7 cents. The judge is in. And on the right, we have one of Lucy's legal pronouncements. So I'll read it real quickly. It says, "Here we go. That's about right. Isn't it, Charlie Brown? Okay, Charlie Brown, I'll hold the ball and you come running up and kick it. Charlie Brown, I can't believe it. I can't believe that anyone would think I was so completely stupid. Lucy, I won't pull it away like I usually do, Charlie Brown. Charlie Brown, ha, I know your promises. Lucy, well, let's shake on it, okay? Let's shake on it. This proves my sincerity. Charlie Brown, what could I do? If someone is willing to shake on something, you have to trust her. Charlie Brown starts running. Whoosh, thump. Then Lucy, a woman's handshake is not legally binding. There's Peanuts humor for you. So why did I bring that in, and why did I bring it in? Because in the prior Parsha, God has just given the 10 Commandments, but in this Parsha, Mishpatim, Moses proceeds to promulgate many other of God's laws. And at the very end, he commands a large group of people to come up to Mount Sinai. So Mishpatim, in terms of our big ideas, I'll get back to what this picture means in a second. Mishpatim means judgments, but it means much, much more, much like what Penina was just helping educate us on. And we'll talk about that just in a second. The other big ideas we'll get to, in this parasha, Mishpatim refers to the many, many laws that Moses pronounces after receiving the 10 Commandments. And lastly, we'll take a closer look at one of those laws, which is pretty well renowned, the eye for an eye law, which is part of this parsha as well. So going back to the picture real quickly. Sorry, was someone saying something? Yeah. Yeah, Brad, please. Yeah.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you explain the difference between, say, Mishpatim and mitzvot? Are these mitzvot what we're reading about in this parsha, or
So,
I'm not sure. I mean, there are 613 of them, but I don't know, how you count them. And do those include these Mishpatim?
The short answer, yes. And this is a good example. Y'all are avid Torah study folks, right? So you've been in situations where, it's helpful to ask teachers the same question because you'll get different responses from different teachers. And Penina, I see your hand. I'll get you in just a second. So
okay. Oh, sorry. Okay.
No worries. My perspective, Brad, the way I personally try to keep it straight between Mishpatim and mitzvot is I think of Mishpatim as, they can be examples of ordinances that we are commanded to do. So I think of the commandment related to the impetus, the obligation, sometimes the burden, sometimes the joy that comes with the doing of it, whereas Mishpat is more of the what it might be that is done. And that's not the only relationship between those, but that's how I personally construe it. Penina, over to you.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. It's the consequences of what happens when you do them or you don't do them. For example, kabed et avicha ve'et imecha. Honor your father and your mother. The word kabed doesn't mean to honor. The word kabed means to carry the load because it's hard and it's a burden and it's something that you do. But how does it benefit you? Your children are going to see what you're doing. They're going to see the consequences of what it is to care for somebody that old. And they probably or hopefully will learn and do the same for you. And that's what למען יאריכון ימיך על פני האדמה. So your days are going to linger on the face of the earth. Why? Because your kids saw what you did for your parents. Hopefully they'll do it for you. Your days on earth are going to be lingered. That's about it.
Thank you. I'm especially glad you brought in the concept.
It's cause and result. Cause and result.
Yep. Yeah, because in particular, being, as I think I mentioned before, I'm close to the end, but I'm still in rabbinical school. And by golly, the conversations we have about consequences around mitzvot, it's lovely almost. But real quickly, if you've ever had the pleasure of being to the Knesset, there are these giant Marc Chagall paintings. From left to right, they're intended to represent the past, the present, and the future of Israel. And they're big ideas, so I put them on the big ideas slide. All right. So now we're going to delve a little bit deeper into this word mishpatim. And as part of this word study, real quickly, those of us that were there in person, yay, super exciting. Almost everyone you see here is a rabbi now. Such a gift. Mishpatim means judgments and much, much more. So how are we going to explore that? First off, what we see here at the top, Mishpatim, Parshat Mishpatim. That's the plural. Below that, Mishpat. That's the singular. And one concept that I wanted to spend a little bit of time on was how, and this is, I don't think I mentioned before, I'm pursuing, I'm an aspiring rabbi, but I've spent a long career as an engineer before. And I also like grammar. I'm a very precise, mathematical, how do these relationships work type of person. And by gosh, like Hebrew is so much more structured, linear, organized, everything. There's a logic like mathematics that pervades the language that I so appreciate. I mean, I like I'm also a philosophy major, so there's like two sides going on here. I love the creativity of English, but you can do a lot of mishmash, lots of creativity, poeticism feels and looks different in English than it does in Hebrew. So one of the things I wanted to mention and emphasize, Mishpatim. This mem is a prefix. When you see mems in Hebrew, sometimes they're part of a root, oftentimes they're a prefix. And in this case, with Mishpatim, this is one of these prefix cases. And there are a few different things that a mem prefix can mean. We'll look at them right now. Sometimes when the letter mem is a prefix, this starting here on the left with number 1, mem, ma, can mean from. Like this says, mi Yerushalayim. That's from Jerusalem. If I'm going to say, at some point when I was talking very quickly before, I mentioned I'm from Texas. Ani, mi, Texas. I am from Texas. Another very common example is over here on the right. Mem can also be part of a verb, like how a verb is conjugated. So this example, if you were looking at the bottom right, melamed. That can be that's the present tense of teach. So ani melamed. I teach, I am teaching. Or Penina melamedet. Penina is teaching, she teaches. So in this case, with Mishpatim, we're looking at probably another third way of the mem. This case, this is a loose concept, but it's like mem here means what is verbed. So meaning mishpat, if you will. I'm going to go toward the verb here in a second. The verb is the part that's over here to the left of the prefix. Shin, fe, tet. So the verb shafat, that has 3 primary meanings in biblical Hebrew. These 3 meanings that you see here on the screen, these are taken from a biblical dictionary. The modern meanings are often inspired by and are sometimes one-to-one with the biblical Hebrew. But I just wanted to caution that because, as I have learned myself, sometimes if I speak biblical Hebrew to someone who's a modern Hebrew speaker, that can often provoke a bit of a humorous conversation. Penina, yeah, please.
The mem, it also stands for from. In other words, it's a cause and effect. From the judgment, that's what we got. From the judgment, mishpat, me, from. So it's not just, it's a statement that was tried. In other words, it's cause and effect. So the mem here, it's not just there for good looks. It's to tell you that it was a cause, an effect, the effect of what happened. So it's also already a verdict, not just the trial, it's also a cause to a verdict. So it's, in other words, when you stand in trial, you have to really weigh the how do you call it? The
evidence, maybe?
Exactly. You have to weigh the evidence. You have to have witnesses. You have to have time to consider all the circumstances. So it's not the word mishpat. It's not just plain judgment. It's already been, it's like the cause and the effect and what happened. So in other words, before you come to a judgment, you really have to really weigh all the circumstances, everything that was involved before you just come up with the consequence. So yeah. It's really heavy.
Yeah, it's
really heavy.
It's very kibud. It is very weighty. Meaning, I think a native Hebrew speaker would think of it exactly that way from this. Whereas right. I think, if you're a native English speaker, or
also maybe two, it also to come to something, right?
I think the concept is conveyed well when it's thought of as what is blanked. So if we think about the verb, if it's someone shafats something, who shafat, meaning that means someone can judge or govern. This can be God or it can be human beings. Moses or Moses's designees can shafat something. It can be to decide a controversy. or it can be to execute a judgment, to implement a judgment. So when we think about, okay, mishpat, this can be, okay, the cause and the effect of the judgment. It can be what is judged, what is governed. It can be what is decided. It can be what is executed. And indeed, that's what we see. If you look up in the same biblical dictionary, the noun mishpat itself, and there'll be, I'm spoiling it, there are 6 primary definitions total. And within these 6 definitions, there's approximately like 30 plus sub-definitions. So I've spared us the sub-definitions of looking at 30 different A, B, C, D, E's, but there are 6 primary definitions, meaning in English, it can be a judgment, the act of deciding a case, judging. It can be an attribute of the capitalized one who judges, meaning an attribute of God, justice, rightness, or rectitude. It can also be an ordinance promulgated by God or humankind. So Brad, to the question you asked earlier about like, okay, mitzvot versus mishpat, like mishpatim can be the laws that we have to obey, the regulations. It can be a decision in a case of law. It can also be one's legal right. This mostly has to do with priests in the Bible, meaning what priests are owed or what is due to the priests, because again, this is an aside, but like the priests don't have an allocated portion of land that they can, till and make money off of. So there's all kinds of conversation about what is mishpatei, the priests, because it's what they're due. And it can also be what is proper, what is fitting, what is measured, or like a custom. The mishpatei, the customs or the norms of people. And this is one of those themes that I always like to emphasize whenever we're looking at Hebrew versus English. I just counted off 6, and I also, the precision person in me was like, yeah, there's 30 more meanings within these sub-meanings. Well, that's one of the permeating relationships of Hebrew and English. If you look at a Hebrew and an English dictionary, and just look at like a Hebrew English dictionary book, the Hebrew is going to be some part, and then the English part's going to be like a big, huge layer cake on top of that, because a word like mishpatim can mean several different things. Why is that important? Because in this Parshat, there are judgments aplenty. What we're looking at here is a distant view of the old city. And specifically, the Parsha is named after the many laws that Moses pronounces after receiving the 10 Commandments. So, if I had to pick one, I'm going to go back to the list we just talked about. It's probably number 3 that's the closest English equivalent to mishpat, with my caveat is, much like the conversation we've had so far, anytime you pick an English word as a one-to-one translation in Hebrew, you're taking like a slice of the meaning. So as we continue in this journey of learning more about Mishpatim, we kind of got to remember it's like, oh yeah, there's this causal relationship that Penina was especially good about reminding us of. And we're also talking about it could be characteristic, but it could also be, a judgment or a case of law. It's hard because in English, we're used to saying more words, just like I'm doing now, to convey more precision and more meaning. And that's not the way Hebrew is. Hebrew is more, you have to use the context clues. So what is the context for what happens with Mishpatim? Well, Moses, we've just had the 10 Commandments, and then Moses proceeds to offer Mishpatim around household service, what it means to have servants or slaves and the regulations regarding them and the treatment of them. We've also got damages. This is a damaged statue from the Israel Museum down here. And there's a regulation of judgments that Moses proffers regarding how damages need to be handled. There's loans. We're learning more and more about the ancient Israelite economy as archaeological advances progress. But loans were a big deal, and it was a big focus of Revelation in this chapter. Revelation means Moses sharing God's laws. Returning lost property. That's always a nice one to work with. I happen to be on the Irmis campus where I can hear the elementary schoolers outside. This is a very common part of the Parshat to bring for elementary school students. Moses also offers judgments about Shabbat, how to keep it, why it's important. Those are reiterated many times. This is one of those places. He also speaks to the Jubilee. That's the sabbatical year wherein the ancient Israelites were commanded to leave fields fallow by command. And then holidays. Again, the picture is small, but that's a sukkah. Moses speaks some more revelation about some of the main holidays. Sukkot is one of them. And almost, not every single time, but almost every time when you get law giving, Mishpatim or revelation, there's almost always an emphasis on not stamping out and not doing idolatry. That is a big deal whenever there's discussions of law, and it's no exception here. So with that, I wanted to focus a little deeper on damages, because this parasha also has some of the more, one of the most renowned facets of damages that appears, one of the most famous commandments outside of the Ten Commandments, and it relates to damages. Just quick show of hands, who here has heard an eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth? You know, it comes up a lot, right? Well, it's not only from Parshat Mishpatim, we'll see that in just a minute, but in the Tanakh, in the Bible, this is the parasha where it happens. This picture is looking at Bethlehem from when you're from Jerusalem. So specifically in Exodus 21:12 and 23-25, Moses, as he's offering laws, he says, V'chi Yenatsu Anashim, when people, Anashim, brawl, that's sort of the Yenatsu, Ve'im Ason Yihye, and if there's a mishap, meaning if someone hurts, damages, physically impacts one another, V'natana, you shall pay, and then here it is, Nefesh Tachat Nefesh, Ayin Tachat Ayin. I'll say all these and then I'll say them again. Shen Tachat Shen, Yad Tachat Yad, Rego Tachat Rego, Kavyan Tachat Kavyan, Patza Tachat Patza, Chabura Tachat Chabura. I'll say them in English now, from the beginning. When people brawl, and if there's a mishap, you shall pay. A life for a life, eye for an eye, tooth for a tooth, hand for a hand, foot for a foot, burn for a burn, wound for a wound, bruise for a bruise. And before I continue, we're going to explore a little bit more about this in detail. One thing that I wanted to make sure I mentioned up front, even this is pretty explicit, it's pretty direct, right? Moses is saying, if you hurt each other and someone's hand gets hurt, so shall be done to the perpetrator. Well, virtually every rabbinic commentator from the early rabbis onward, and some anthropological, scholars who come at things from more of like a history angle, there is close to not 100%, but close to a consensus that the meaning of this is not meant to be literal, and perhaps was not implemented literally. Meaning what actually happened was, even though it's pretty direct language, what's meant is if you hurt someone's eye, hand, tooth, etc., you have to pay for it. You have to pay damages. So, and briefly, why is that the case? As you might imagine, especially the early rabbis onward, trying to equally distribute damages for hurting someone's hand or hurting someone's eye or tooth or nose, extremely difficult. People are different sizes. Not every person uses their hands and their eyes for the same thing. There are all different ways in which we're different, which makes the pragmatic application of a law like this close to impossible to do fairly. And I know that it's just something I wanted to make sure and get out there because it's helpful to keep in mind in case this parasha comes up in circumstances with other Jews or otherwise. So, where did it come from? The scholarly term, and I'm using ayin tachat ayin, an eye for an eye, because that's the most, of all these 10 different or 8 different turns of phrase, for whatever reason, it's eye for an eye is the most popular, even though life for a life is the one that occurs first. Oh, Brad, yeah, you had a question?
Doesn't it come from the Hammurabi Code?
Yes! Bingo! Exactly. So, the scholarly term lex talionis, the law of retaliation, or the law of exact retribution. This concept first appeared in the ancient Near East. The ancient Near East is the formal term that we use to refer to the time in which the Bible was set. Almost 1,000 years earlier from Hammurabi, just like you said, Brad. So what we're looking at here now, if you on the left, is the Hammurabi stela. Stela means like it can be any size, but oftentimes they're big and oftentimes they're stone and they're carved. This is from 1750 BCE. That's about 1,000 years before the Parshat Mishpatim. It outlines the Hammurabi Code, which includes the first known version of eye for an eye. And I emphasize the word known because, as with so much of ancient history, is it possible that there were other civilizations in and around the ancient Near East that could have had a concept like this? Entirely possible. But this is the source for where we as modern humans first started to learn about it and appreciate it and trace the history of it originated from the Hammurabi. So that's a very nuanced perspective. It's possible that Hammurabi was the society that came up with it. What we can say for certain is it was codified on a stone that survived, and that was how we first started to learn about it when this was discovered around 100 years ago. And I say, however, because now we're going to get into a key difference between the Hammurabi Code and what's in Parshat Mishpatim. In fact, I'm going to go back real quickly and read it one more time. So in Exodus, this is Moses. When people brawl, if there's a mishap, you shall pay life for a life, eye for an eye, etc. And the pay part is the key verb. We're not actually doing exact hurting someone's hand when you hurt someone's hand because it's impossible to do that fairly. You're paying for it. That's how it reads in Exodus. Now we're going to go to the Hammurabi Code itself. And before I start reading, if you're looking at your screen in the top left, that is a landowner, or it's a depiction of what an ancient Babylonian landowner might have looked like. And on the right is also a landowner. So there's 3 parts to this part of the Hammurabi Code. And the first part says, if a landowner blinds the eye of another landowner, so that's why I have this arrow going from person on left to person on right, landowner hurting a landowner of the same class, they shall blind his eye. If he breaks the bone of a landowner, they shall break his bone. So that's the surface level reading. You hurt someone's bone, you hurt someone's eye, your eye is going to get hurt in yourselves. The second part, if the same landowner blinds the eye or breaks the bone of a commoner, he shall pay 1 mina of silver. Mina is like a unit, so he's going to pay a fine. This image that you see with the arrow in number 2, that's a potential depiction of a Babylonian commoner. So notice, first option, if a landowner hurts another landowner, then we have eye for an eye, literally. But if a landowner hurts a commoner, the landowner just pays a fine. No, there's no eye for an eye. Third option, if the same landowner blinds the eye of a landowner's slave or breaks the bone of a landowner's slave, he shall weigh out half of the slave's value. So again, there's a fine. And that bottom image is a depiction of a Babylonian servant. So Again, if you're looking at the images on the left, 1, 2, 3, we have different criteria based on social class. If you're a property owner in ancient Babylon and you hurt another property owner, that's where eye for an eye happens. But if you hurt a commoner, or if you hurt a servant, also known as a slave, your eye's not getting put out yourself. You're paying a fine. Why is that relevant? Why does that matter? This differs from an eye for an eye in Exodus because callback. In other words, to answer this question, we have to go back to Parshat, which we're going to do right now. This is Exodus 12:49. And I'll say the Hebrew and then I'll read the English. Torat achat yehiyeh. One law there shall be. The rest of the phrase, one law there shall be for the citizen and for the sojourner who dwells among you. I'll say it one last time. One law there shall be for the citizen and for the sojourner who dwells among you. What does it all mean? I'll quote Professor Shauna Delansky. Before I do that, the images that you're looking at, the commoner here on the left, the landowner in the middle, the servant on the right, equal arrows going between them, quoting Professor Delansky, quote, she's talking about the Bible, what Moses says. In invoking the lex talionis here in this way, the Bible fosters and advocates for an important advance in ancient jurisprudence, the idea of all people being equal under God. So the key difference, when Moses pronounces eye for an eye, again, it's not a literal eye for an eye, you're paying for damages. The key here is it doesn't matter whether or not an Israelite is hurting a sojourner or a Hebrew slave or a servant. The penalty is the same for anyone who hurts anyone else. Penina, yeah, your hand.
I think it's because you make the person that you are, like, for example, God forbid, poke his eye out. It makes this person unable to work, to be able to help the person that he originated blinded. In other words, you're actually committing a double. It's like doing over again the same thing because you are enabling that person to be able to do reprimands, or to be able to help him, help that person that he hurt to begin with. You're just causing another person who is unable to do anything. It becomes again a weight on society instead of making him productive, so he should be able to pay back or help out the person that he hurt to begin with. So you have to look at actually the thing that they tell you to do and see the cause and effect. You don't just do it. So they give you the laws, but then there is circumstances that you always have to consider around them. So to do something that's already pre-decided didn't work. So it asked for different opinions. It asked for different, sources to be able to actually help the person that you hurt to begin with.
Yeah, Brad, I see your hand. Thank you, Penina. Brad, I see your hand. I'll get you in just a second. I just wanted to mention, like, when I reflect on my relationship with the Torah, I remember initially appreciating the pragmatism of in other words, the underlying spirit that I saw here is that, oh, well, yeah, in order to have a functioning society, you need to be able to give people the chance to make amends. It does no good to perpetuate the cycle of hurt. But over time, I think I like to think I've become more sensitive to the moral side. And because I really value and appreciate how much our text and our teaching seek to imbue a sense of communal responsibility through mutual cause and effect. Yes. Okay. And Brad, you had your hands raised. Thanks for waiting.
Yeah, I mean, in the same parsha, aren't there very special rules on how you deal with a slave, for example. So not everybody is treated equally.
Yes.
So there's a bit of an inconsistency, right? Between, you know, what you're laying out is this new development in jurisprudence and other statements within the same parsha that treat different people differently.
Yes. And it's important, and I'm very glad you pointed that out, Brad, because what you all just witnessed is that I think I don't think all, but many aspiring clergy like to reach and point toward the aspects of our tradition that were ahead of their time. But there is no escaping how, just like exactly what you said, Brad, is 100% the case. And I'm going to go back to a few slides to where I was talking about the different laws that Moses articulates. You know, in the top left where I put household service, that is a euphemism for slavery, period, full stop, which is, you know, it still remains a complex phenomena in that, yes, was the concept of Hebrew servants or Hebrew slavery, were there rights afforded to slaves? Yes. Was that meaningful? Yes. Did it make it any less abhorrent morally now than it is? No. And I I appreciate you. I so appreciate your mentioning, Brad, because I think as like I said, as you just saw, people in my shoes can run toward and emphasize the part that is admirable, sometimes without giving due shape to the part that's not.
Mm.
Penina, yeah.
We were supposed to be the example. Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah. The Torah is going to come out from Zion. We were supposed to start in breeding, if you want to call it that, or in just making people aware that we are not animals, and the instinct of just to pay back is not going to fit us. We are made differently. We can think and we can weigh situations. And the whole idea is that the sentences gave you examples, but we know today that the examples doesn't fit every situation, but it fitted as many situations as they met maybe during that time, or fitted the society, the makeup of society at that time. And the whole idea is that Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah, the changes, we have to look up at the places who are going to give us more fitted solutions or humane solutions. And today, when I looked at the news, they gave us a body of somebody who is not even one of the hostages. So how would you deal with this? So we are going to wait and see. But the law, I think, changed according to the circumstances that people met or were faced with. So it's changing all the time. And that's why you hear that there is a new law now regarding that thing, and then there is something that was taken away regarding another thing. We change. People are changing, and the circumstances changes, and therefore we adapt to what society is giving us or presented us with. And I really want to see how we're going to deal with this thing, that we was given a body that wasn't even one of the hostages instead of one of ours. So think about it. Okay, when we're always looking at people to blame, or people are quick to blame. So it's to give us a pause, to teach us to take a pause and not to do judgment in a breath of one breath of air. We have to look around and see what fits today, and maybe learn of maybe not to do it for the next time. So it's all a process of learning. Ki mitzion tetzeh Torah. The Torah keeps coming out. It's not something that was once out there and then we put it away and we just take it out when it's time to do a Zoom. It's constantly in our face every day, all the time. And this is what the whole thing is trying to teach us. Okay, so think about that. And it's really very hard to say, oh, it was written because of that and that and that and that. We weren't there. We are a result of what was there. And they probably needed this particular law at the time because it fits the times. And heaven knows that it fits our times too. Okay. Okay, that's all I have to say.
No, I think I think it's a good transition because I wanted to take this to a personal level now and invite each of us to think of a time from our own history, our own past, where someone, let me remember the phrase that I chose before. When someone brawled with us. It doesn't have to be a literal brawl. I'm just quoting the English word that I picked from the section. I'd like each of us to think of a time when someone hurt us. And our initial thought was to seek lex talionis, an eye for an eye. But maybe there was someone, yourself, a parent, a friend, who gave some advice or suggested that we pursue a different path, a path that didn't involve retribution. So let's try and think of an example of that for just a second. Okay. I've got my example, but I would love to hear an example from someone else first. Who would like to share what they thought of? Rebecca?
Can you repeat the question?
Yeah, sure. The question is, think of a time from your past when someone hurt you and you wanted to do retribution, do the same thing to them, but you somehow took the path that did not involve retribution instead. Maybe a parent or a friend or yourself counseled yourself to react in a different way. Okay, Merle.
I'm just thinking, I've never been one for retribution because I wouldn't know what to do. But I'm thinking that I've always said, this will come back to you. Not to their face, but to whatever the situation is, this will come back to you.
Like what goes around comes around?
Yeah.
So and keep me honest, so if it sounds like part of what keeps you from considering retribution is that sense of obligation or duty to other people.
Yeah.
Thank you. Benjamin?
Well, I'm not sure if this fits exactly, so I'll make it short. But in one point in my life, I felt I was severely wronged by somebody without the details. And I was, angry and I was upset and wanted to do that payback or get even. But at some later point, I realized that it was only hurting me to hold those feelings of anger and the payback. And it was, like I said, hurting me. I said, taking years off my life. So I had to let go. And then I felt better.
Wow. Well, I mean, and again, you got to keep me honest. My experience suggests that is not easy. Thank you. And I appreciate each of those words of wisdom. They are a nice lift, especially on a day like today. So before we say farewell, last time, if you may recall, we closed by doing an excerpt from the Haftarah, the what's read after the Torah when the Torah is read. almost always from a book of the prophets. This Haftarah for Parshat Mishpatim comes from Jeremiah 33:25-26. I'll read in English. Thus said Adonai, as I have surely set out my covenant with day and night, the laws of the heavens and the earth, so will I not reject the offspring of Jacob and my servant David. I will never fail to take rulers from his offspring, from the seed of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, for I will restore their fortunes and show them mercy. This is a message I wanted to conclude with because I'm an optimist at heart. I'm not feeling particularly optimistic today, but when I read this, it was the start of something. So thank you all very, very much for spending the time learning together and for sharing your thoughts. Be well, be safe. This is a closing picture of the Kotel, the Western Wall. Shabbat Shalom, wishing you a very refreshing Shabbat, and hopefully you're all able to find some solace and rest while we're on it.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Thank you
Shabbat
very
shalom,
much.
everyone.
Thank
Yeah,
you. Thank you. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Tim,
Shabbat shalom.
Shabbat
Tim,
Shalom.
this was great. Thank you very much.
This was wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you too, Merle. Okay. Thank you, Pino. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye.
Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom. Okay. Bye, Douglas. Bye, Helen. And Hannah, thanks a lot. We appreciate it. Okay. Bye-bye.